I love it. She took her destiny into her own hands and just thought, I'm going for it. Brilliant. Brave.
Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW. My name is Nikki Shields.
And I'm Jonathan Tilley.
And today on the podcast, we've got something rather special. Now, today, of course, is International Women's Day.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Celebrating amazing women all over the world. Gosh, what a great day. Now, whether it's been beating men in motorsport, successes behind the wheel, or groundbreaking inventions that really changed our way of driving forever, this podcast episode is all about celebrating the 11 women who we think have really left their mark on the automotive world. Now, of course, there are plenty more, just the 11 we've chosen. So I think today is also a tribute to all of the women around the world who are really changing or have changed the pathway for women in motorsport and women in the automotive world. I mean, I personally have got to thank them because, you know, we now have this amazing platform and where women are considered to be on a level playing field, which of course was not the case in previous history. So change is happening and that is what we are celebrating today.
Yes, most definitely. Now, Nikki, before we even dive in, I think your perspective is so interesting because you come from a history, a family of motorsport and automobiles and everything. And being a woman in the automobile industry, what is it like being a woman with this male-dominated world of autosport? What is it like for you?
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And given the fact that I've only been in it for, maybe 8 years, looking back, I can already see a huge difference.
Really?
For me, on a sort of the TV side of things, I walk into my TV crew 6-7 years ago, and I was the only female among a crew of 60 men. I now look around, we've probably got more like 15, 20 women in our team,
Wow.
which is a huge change. My floor manager's female, my producer is female, the photographer's female, the PR, the marketing, the engineers, the mechanics, the team principals. There is a female in every role in Formula E, which is just wonderful to see. And I think it gives the next generation, the younger generation, those role models. And, you have to be able to see women in those roles. Otherwise, it's very difficult for you to aspire to be that person or to want to take that job in the future. So I think it's been an amazing journey. And I think now we are in a very strong position working as a woman in the automotive industry. I can't imagine what it would have been like 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Definitely not 100 years ago. It would have been a very challenging time indeed.
Well, now you're standing on the shoulders of the women that came before, and you are inspiring so many other women watching, listening, being a part of automotive industry and being the inspiration for them as well. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the women to have paved the way for me.
Yes. Woohoo. So before we list off our top 11 women who have changed the automotive industry for now and forevermore, it most definitely needs to be said that throughout the history of the automobile, female pioneers have played a key role in the successful development of the driving pleasure that we all enjoy today.
Yeah, indeed. I didn't even realize this until we started researching for this podcast, but things like the inventor of the windscreen wiper was a woman. The inventor of vehicle heating and the kevlar fibers that we use today was by a woman. There were pioneering trips made by women with the first motor vehicles around the dawn of the 20th century. It's not the first time we've had women at the forefront of the automotive world, that's for sure. One example, the first circumnavigation of the globe in a car was made by a woman back in 1929, Clärenore Stinnes. How did I do with that? Was that okay?
Well done.
Thank you.
Really well done. And there's even that's a hard one to pronounce. Well done, Nick.
Thank you. And then, of course, we have the first transgender driver to finish the 24-hour race, Charlie Martin, around Germany's legendary Nürburgring track. And in doing so, she's broken into the mainstream, set herself up as a role model for the LGBT community, which is just a huge achievement, I think. And all of this is really closely linked to the 11 amazing women from all around the world that we're going to be learning about today. And well, I've got to say, as women in the automotive world, it is a real honour and a privilege to share their stories with you today. So do listen and do share this podcast as well with other women and men who will certainly appreciate our top 11 women.
Exactly. After all, it is International Women's Day, right? It's the least that you can do. Share the love.
Exactly.
All right. Coming in at number 1 is Wilhelmine Ehrhardt. Now, throughout the history of the motor car, women, they've been playing key roles, like Nicki said, and you just might not have known about it before until today. And what we now take for granted was unusual at the beginning of the automotive age. The emerging motor vehicles were considered a male domain. And I mean, even still to this day, there are remnants of that. So in the spring of 1899, way back when, the Eisenach vehicle factory in Germany, well, they set out on the first major outing with all of the motor vehicles they'd produced so far, just showing off all the stuff that they produced. And Wilhelmine Ehrhardt was not only the wife of the factory manager, she also had a very, you could say, confident personality. She was not shy, right?
That's what you need.
Exactly. She was so confident, in fact, that she had absolutely zero problem being behind the wheel of one of the 4 Wartburg motor vehicles and enjoyed the astonished faces of the people passing by. I mean, think about it. Way back then in 1899, a woman behind the wheel in a very male-dominated era and time and culture, this was unprecedented.
Yeah, it just didn't happen. It really didn't.
Exactly. And, you know, even after that, it would be difficult to put the brakes on her enthusiasm for all things automotive. When her husband, his name is Gustav Ehrhardt, when he signed up with the newly developed Wartburg racing car for the first long-distance cross-border trip from Innsbruck, Austria to Munich, Germany, same year, 1899, Wilhelmine came along for the ride. Now, this mountainous route from Innsbruck to Munich through the Inn Valley was very demanding. And I live in Germany. I've driven that route. It is not easy. But for Wilhelmine, it represented a welcome challenge that she gladly took on. And unfortunately, she had to wait almost a whole year for her dream of starting as the actual driver in a motor race, but her patience most definitely paid off. And on August 3rd, 1901, she made motorsports history with her participation in the Eisenach-Meiningen-Eisenach long-distance automobile trip through Germany's Hainich mountain range chain. That is a mouthful, even for somebody that lives in Germany. So this is definitely groundbreaking stuff. And despite an inferior engine, she only narrowly missed out on the podium.
Love it. What determination.
Yes.
She must have loved being part of it, though, even though she missed out on the win.
Yeah.
Well, next on our list is Stefanie Kwolek. And, well, this is quite an interesting one, actually, because let's step away from the automotive world. And I'm going to say to you, bulletproof vests. Don't worry, I'm not about to shoot you, Jonathan. But I want you to think about the material that makes them bulletproof. Well, it's a fibre called kevlar. Now, these fibres are 5 times as strong as steel. Quite incredible, really. But the same weight as normal fibres. And they're also fire resistant. So they have been used in the automobile industry for years now, used for things like filters or belts or seats, seals, actually even used in tyres.
Yep.
And what it means is these special fibres ensure extremely high dimensional stability, even at those high temperatures and speeds. And if it weren't for those advantages of Kevlar fibres are also the reduction in driving noise and the reduction in rotational weight, which leads to a reduction in engine load. So all in all, Kevlar, pretty amazing, pretty useful in the world of the automobile industry and actually, you know, further afield as well. But let's go back to where it all came from. You know, what has this got to do with women? Well, one day back in 1964 in Buffalo, New York, a chemist was actually having troubles converting a solid polymer into a liquid form. And she went through multiple rounds of testing and then, as it tends to be the way in science, a happy accident occurred. And this is how Kevlar fibres were discovered. So the chemist who actually had this happy accident was none other, of course, than Stefanie Kwolek. And Stefanie was the innovative mother of this superfiber invention who has really helped to lay the foundation of the development of the automotive industry. So there we go, a happy accident.
Exactly. And, bulletproof vests, that could be an accident as well. But we're so glad that we have the bulletproof vests and the seatbelts and the tires. I mean, this is a material that just blows my mind. When researching this, I was like, what? That is so cool. Now, moving on to our third woman that most definitely needs to be featured in this podcast is Clärenore Stinnes. So, she always believed that women could do what men could do. And she was even quoted as saying, "We're not better, but at least as good."
I love that quote.
Right?
I'm going to start using that quote. That's brilliant.
It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. And now she was a courageous daredevil who had this insane idea at only 26 years old to embark on an adventure of a lifetime. She wanted to circumnavigate the world in a car. Now, mind you, this has not been done before way back then. So this wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to follow in the footsteps of so-and-so. It was like, no, I have this crazy idea that's never been done before. So in the summer of 1927, she departed Frankfurt, Germany in her 34.5 horsepower Adler Standard 6 and headed east and just kept on going. And she brought somebody along for the ride, her colleague, a Swedish cinematographer named Carl Axel Söderström, and they drove through ice and heat and mud and snow for 25 months. Like,
wow, that's a long
years
time.
Plus, like that's a long road trip, right?
How big was her suitcase? Is my question. That's a lot of clothes that you need to pack.
So there were often back then no roads, no maps, most definitely no GPS, no navigation, no gas stations or workshops to check on the car and make sure that things were running okay. They drove through the Balkans, across the Caucasus to Siberia, through the Gobi Desert to China and Japan, over the Andes and across the USA. Now, the fact that this life-threatening expedition was completed was due in no small part to Clärenore's determination. Turning back, it wasn't an option. She had this dream, she wanted to make it happen, and she did. And when they got to the east coast of the USA, they took a ship to Europe to complete their journey. And on June 24th, 1929, they crossed the finish line in Berlin with the odometer having racked up 29,054 miles, or in kilometers, that's 46,758 kilometers.
Wow.
That's a lot of determination.
Wow. So if ever you come across a problem and you think, I can't do this, I'm going to think of Clärenore and think, yes, I can. if she can achieve that, wow. And back then, nearly over 100 years ago, I mean, that again, what an amazing strength of character. And what fun they must have had. God, the stories they must have.
The stories. I mean, that was smart to bring a cinematographer with you just to capture all the memories, because surely over those 2 years, you must have an amazing adventure.
Yeah, gosh, how incredible. Well, next on our list, a slightly different journey is Mary Anderson. Now, the reason that Mary Anderson has got a place on our list is because, well, way back in the early 1900s, Mary Anderson was driving in New York City, and we know how bad the weather can get in New York. There was a lot of rain, there was a lot of snow. And, when you're driving, they constantly had to actually stop, get out and wipe their windshields down. So to her, it was pretty obvious. It was like, well, hang on a minute. I don't want to do this every time I'm driving in the rain and snow, because in New York, this is happening all the time. We need an automatic wiper blade. So in 1903, and actually the same year as contemporaries Robert Douglas and John Apjohn, Mary Anderson applied for a patent on her innovation. But fortunately, she was the only inventor with an actual working device, and consequently it meant that she was granted her patent, not Robert Douglas and John Apjohn, which is brilliant for her. So then November the 10th came. the US Patent Office granted Mary Anderson her US patent number 743,801 for her, I quote, window cleaning device for automobiles and other vehicles for removing snow, rain and sleet from the grass in the front of the motorman. I love how it was called a motorman then. Motorman or woman, it should have said. Well, basically, obviously, so her device had a lever at steering wheel height that the driver could operate by hand. So really nothing much has changed, very similar to what we have now. And if the lever was operated, then a spring-load swing arm with a rubber band would be actuated and then return to its starting position. So there we have it. That was the very first windscreen wiper. And actually, when she received her patent, Anderson tried to sell it to a Canadian manufacturing company, but unfortunately the company refused on the basis that the device would have no practical use. I wonder if it was a man selling it to the Canadian manufacturing company, would they have come up with the same answer? So very sadly, they said no. And then mechanical windscreen wipers actually became standard equipment on cars by 1930. But Mary Anderson never profited from her idea, which is a bit sad if she came up with the idea. But clearly she was ahead of her time.
Yes.
And clearly, as the inventor of the windshield wiper, she is still one of the women who helped laid the foundations of the progress that's taken place in automotive engineering. And that engineering vision that she had back then is still helping every driver today to have a nice clear field of vision for a safe journey in any weather. So I do think the next time it rains or it snows, think of Mary Anderson for bringing this invention to your car.
And we are very grateful. I mean, I know on rainy days, I'm like, I just want to get that windshield wiper timing and tempo perfectly right. And it's all because of her.
There we go.
All right. Coming in at number 5 in the whole history of women in the automotive industry, we have Bertha Benz, who is certainly a leading figure and a pioneer. Now, it wasn't Carl Benz, the successful engineer, but his wife, Bertha, who ensured the success of the automobile. Now, it was her and not him who completed the first successful cross-country trip in a car in August 1888. And we know you probably have heard the name Benz somewhere before. Yes, Mercedes-Benz is our rivals and competition, but we got to give it up to Bertha for her get-up-and-go attitude. So you might be asking yourself, what did she take with her? Well, she took her sons and a big slice of guts and self-confidence. That's what she took with her on this cross-country journey. So let's just rewind a little bit more. So Germany's Carl Benz invented the automobile in Mannheim in 1886 before registering the vehicle under German patent number 37435. Now, the response, however, not really great, not as euphoric as you would expect. Actually, there was a distrust of this new horseless carriage. What could this be, right? So at that point, Bertha Benz, she was getting fed up. She was like, we have to show this off to the world. This is groundbreaking. So she seized the initiative. She got behind the wheel without further ado and just drove the vehicle 66 miles or 106 kilometers from Mannheim to Pforzheim. Now, this was a hugely courageous undertaking, as a journey like this had never really been done. It was a real adventure at the time. Now, there were only a handful of paved roads. Most of the way she had to steer the car over uneven dirt roads. And I don't know about you, but with four-wheel drive, even on uneven dirt roads now, that's pretty tricky. But like in one of the first cars, I mean, come on, way back then, it must have been a nightmare to navigate. And since there were also no road signs either, because remember, it's way back then with horse-drawn carriages, railroad tracks were helping with orientation, and while a hat pin and a garter belt were pressed into service for necessary repairs at various points.
There you go.
So she was taking this trip from Mannheim to Pforzheim and making some small little repairs with a hat pin and a garter belt. Like, that's
initiative.
Cool, right?
This lady is very
initiative, right?
Thinking on her feet here.
Exactly. And so when she got to her destination, she called her husband back in Mannheim to say, "Hey, honey, I took the car out for a drive with the kids." And in the beginning, he was not impressed at all. But after hearing about the accolades of what she'd done, which for back in the time would be the equivalent of a viral PR marketing scheme going viral on Insta and TikTok and Facebook, he quickly changed his mind, didn't he?
I love it. She took her destiny into her own hands and just thought, I'm going for it. Brilliant. Brave. Brazen.
There you go, Bertha. Brilliant, brave Bertha.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to remember it. Brilliant, brave Bertha Benz. Say that quickly on repeat. Well, next on our list, I've got to say a big thank you to this lady because I never underestimate the importance of the heat in my car, particularly in the dead of winter. I cannot stand getting into a freezing cold car. I mean, I know it's now common practice for us to have nice heated seats and, we can select exactly what temperature we want it down to the 0.5 degree. But it wasn't standard back in the 1800s. But Margaret Wilson wanted to do something about it. So next on our list is Margaret Wilson. She was born in Chicago in 1838, and quite simply, she was the inventor of car heating. She was one of the first female mechanical engineers, and she was actually granted numerous US patents for her inventions. Fortunately, we get to benefit now from the heat in our cars. But it was back in the fall of 1893 when she applied for the patent of her invention of car heating, which was registered on November the 28th, 1893, a very long time ago. Now, her system consisted of a combustion chamber under the car and then a system of pipes beneath the passenger compartment through which heated water was fed. So actually, relatively simple, but it hadn't been done previously. And I think this is a really important invention for the automotive industry because it actually killed two birds with one stone. Not only did it make driving easier in foggy and cool weather by, of course, keeping the windows nice and fog-free, but, of course, then we all benefit from the interior of a nicely warm interior. Then, of course, we benefit from the desired temperature in the interior of the car, pretty much making the driving experience a lot more pleasant and safer as well, because you do need to demist those windows. It's important to see where you're going.
Definitely. Kind of important. So we had the windshield wipers in the beginning. Now inside the car for the windshield, defogging as well. Thank you so much, Margaret Wilcox. All right, coming up in number 7 is Danica Patrick. So we're going to jump ahead a few decades, and Danica Patrick had demonstrated impressively just how fast and successful women can be on a racetrack. So the female race car driver who hails from Wisconsin, which is in the United States, is one of the most successful women in NASCAR and IndyCar motorsports. Seriously, she just blows the roof off of it. So between 2005 and 2018, she was active in both race series, and she contested her first IndyCar race at the Homestead Miami Speedway in 2005, and 3 years later, in 2008, she celebrated her first and only IndyCar win at Motegi, Japan. And her best overall result was 9th place in 2009, in a season when the female car racer also took 3rd place at the Indy 500 and 8th place at the 24 Hours of Daytona race. Like, she's unstoppable.
She's awesome. Yeah, she's amazing. I follow her Instagram. I'm a big fan. She kicks
there
ass.
You go. I mean, in total, she contested 116 races in the American Race Series over 8 years. Like, do the math on that. That's crazy, right? I think she had more days behind the wheel racing than like off days. That's insane. And training and everything. So in doing so, she secured 7 podium finishes and 3 pole positions. Not bad at all. And she even continued to drive the IndyCar series until 2011, but she did venture into the NASCAR schedule at the same time. Like, talking about burning the candle at both ends, and you think you have your hands full, let's just go into this other series as well. So after 2 part-time years in the Xfinity series, Patrick drove her first full-time season in America's number 2 stock car league in 2012 before graduating to the NASCAR Cup in 2013. Just the list goes on and on. So over 7 years, Patrick contested 191 races. It just blows my mind. Unfortunately, she never managed to top the podium, but she did manage 7 top 10 finishes, which is remarkable. And in 2013, she also became the first woman to secure pole position at the prestigious Daytona 500 race. So I'm just hats off to her, right? And her brave decision of 2018 to quit at the right time was yet another example of her acting as a role model. I mean, talk about finishing at the top. She had done so much. And then she's like, you know what? Thank you so much. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, she is. She really is one of the best role models that we have for women in racing at the moment. She achieved so much. She worked tirelessly hard. And she is a brilliant role model for the next generation of racing car drivers. So fingers crossed, thanks to the likes of Danica Patrick, we will see more women in racing in future generations.
Yeah.
So next on our list is Suzanne Vanderbilt. Now, let's go back to the mid-1950s. This is when General Motors launched its famous Damsel of Design. Now, this was a group of 10 women that the automaker brought on board in an attempt to better reach new female consumers. So actually, quite ahead of the game back in the 1950s, getting an all-female lineup. However, unfortunately, America's first all-women design team was actually quite short-lived because most of the designers left in the early 1960s after their department was taken over by Bill Mitchell, who unfortunately allegedly said, "No women are going to stand next to any senior designers of mine."
Ouch.
Oh, Bill Mitchell. Really? Really? Okay, it was the 1960s. Do we forgive him? I'm not sure. But despite this pronouncement and the male-dominated automotive industry at the time, actually one of the original damsels, Suzanne Vanderbilt, managed to stay on, and tenaciously she worked her way up the career ladder until she was named chief designer of Chevrolet Interior Studio in 1972. So that's a fantastic achievement.
There you go.
So there is a bit of a success story that came through the original damsels of design. And Vanderbilt then worked as an executive on small cars such as the Nova, the Camaro, and the Chevette. However, unfortunately, at the height of her design career, an illness actually forced her to cut back on work. And actually, she eventually then had to take retirement from GM in 1977. And very sadly, she died 11 years later at the age of just 55. But, she still achieved the incredible, particularly in that era when it was not easy to have, or clearly it wasn't easy when you've got the likes of Bill Mitchell saying, no women are going to stand next to any senior designer of mine. I mean, you can't even begin to imagine that happening in today's you can't even imagine that happening today. But there's an amazing quote that she said, reflecting on what motivated her to remain in such a demanding field. And it was what keeps a designer going is that you're never satisfied. You're constantly looking for perfection, for new and creative answers. And well, thanks to that drive, she did manage to achieve the position of becoming the chief designer of Chevrolet's Interior Studio back in 1972. So again, thank you to Suzanne Vanderbilt for paving the way for all the future automotive designers that followed.
Exactly. Even in the face of adversity and people saying, no, you can't, she proved them wrong and said, yes, I can. That's truly amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, coming in at number 9 is Charlie Martin. We're going to move into the final 3 in this list, and they are all race drivers. Nicki, I think you're a little bit excited about this part.
Maybe. I don't know what gives that away.
I'm not sure. So Charlie Martin, she made history at the 24-hour race around Germany's legendary Nürburgring track. And with her BMW M240i Racing, she finished 4th in her class on the Nordschleife of the racetrack. And her finishing position was secondary for the 39-year-old female race car driver. However, as Charlie Martin was driving for a much bigger goal than just the Nürburgring. What drives her is proving herself as a woman in a male-dominated sport. As the first transgender racing driver to finish this motorsport classic, this daring driver not only fulfilled her dream, but also made herself a role model. So making a difficult decision and staying true to the course of who you are takes a lot of courage, and now she shares her courage to promote more diversity and change in motorsport. She definitely is paving the way for increased female car racer numbers out there. She even said, if we have ambassadors for sport who are passionate about their values and convey the feeling that we should all be active in our own lives, then we can make a huge difference in society. Now, I had the absolute honor of interviewing Charlie Martin a couple episodes previous in podcast number 34. So dive on into podcast 34 of Changing Lanes for an in-depth interview with this amazing female race driver. I remember walking out of the interview and just going like, on those days where I'm not feeling inspired for anything, I'm just going to listen back to this episode because she's just such an inspiration. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah, it's so true. Such an inspiration, so brave, to be doing this and to be really leading the charge. It's just, it's a huge achievement. And I think it's really, this is a moment in the history of motorsport that won't be forgotten. It really is changing the future. And huge credit to Charlie Martin for what she's doing both on and off the track.
Exactly.
So now next on the list, number 10, I'm very excited about this, Lella Lombardi, because she has had such an influence, I think, on Formula One, on motorsport, on female racing drivers. And she's still a name that we can talk about now because, no one has beaten her record yet. So let's discuss. Lella Lombardi is known in the world of motorsport because, particularly in Formula One, because of course she was the only woman to have scored championship points in Formula One. But she had such a fascinating route to becoming a female racing driver because, again, there were no Formula One female racing drivers. You didn't say, yeah, Mum, Dad, when I grow up, I want to drive in Formula One. That just didn't happen back then, and yet she still managed to achieve this. So she was the daughter of a butcher from Piedmont in Italy. She was actually playing handball. And basically what happened, unfortunately, she suffered a serious injury. Lombardi was then transported to hospital by ambulance. Now, of course, when you go into hospital on an ambulance, you're traveling at speed. And I love this. She was so fascinated by the speed of the ambulance that on the journey, she made up her mind that she wanted to try motor racing instead of indoor sport. And that was it.
Ignore the pain. Ignore the pain. Just love the racing. I love
that. That was the light bulb moment for her. So, an injury while playing handball led to a career in Formula One. Absolutely amazing. Between 1974 and 1976, she then drove 12 World Championship Formula One races and finished 7 of them, which again is an achievement back in the 70s. She made her Formula One debut for the Allied Polymer Group team at the 1974 British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, but unfortunately failed to qualify for the race. So she started a Formula One race for the first time the following year in the 1975 South African Grand Prix at Kyalami, driving for the March team. Now then, on April the 27th, 1975, the then 34-year-old finished 6th at the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona and earned half a world championship point.
Wow.
That was it. And no woman has won a championship point in Formula One since. Quite unbelievable. Now, you're probably wondering why she only received half a point. Well, it's because the race was actually prematurely terminated after a serious incident involving Germany's Rolf Stommelen, who was actually leading the race at the time. And that is why only half points were awarded. But still, what an achievement. She also holds the record for the highest starting number in Formula One history. And a little fun fact for you, the 208 on her car at Brands Hatch in 1974 was actually a reference to her sponsor Radio Luxembourg, which at the time of broadcast was on 208 meters medium wave. Now, the car number of 208 will never be repeated because Formula One are no longer permitting numbers to exceed 99. So there you go. She will be the last one to have 208 on her car. And what an achievement. What an incredible record of a rather reserved but very ambitious Italian. And I think Things have got to change for the next generation. This is the target to beat, to try and get some more points. A female racing driver in Formula One. And I really cannot wait to see the day that happens.
Most definitely. Me too. All right, let's finish this baby with a bang with number 11, Jutta Kleinschmidt. All right, she took any cliches about women in automotive settings and confidently banished them to the one of the most remote and inhospitable places you can even imagine, the Sahara Desert. So she has been there and driven her way into the history books behind the wheel of a rally car. So in 1988, she took part in her first Paris-Dakar rally on a motorbike, while in 2001, she became the first woman and also the first German to win the world's toughest desert rally. Now, over a race distance of 6,600 miles, which is like 10,600 kilometers. This Bavarian, she headed the field by 159 seconds in a Mitsubishi Pajero. Now, Jutta subsequently took part in the exacting cross desert race several times in a VW before starting the 2007 Dakar Rally in a, you guessed it, BMW X3CC for the X-Rated BMW team. Rock on. Now, she is such a rock star. With her combination of courage and technical know-how, she repeatedly, over and over, left her mark on the race over almost 20 years. This is just mind-blowing.
Wow.
Now, as a guest starter in road races and as an instructor, she is a passionate helicopter pilot now and has remained loyal to motorsports to this day. And on top of that, Jutta now works as a motivational trainer, giving lectures and seminars for businesses, a powerful role model to say the least, whatever situation you're in, helicopter, business seminars, lectures, on a bike, like she is rocking and rolling in every single level that she can.
Seriously hardcore there, Paris to Dakar. I mean, wow, that is one of the greatest races I think there is. Very, very impressive stuff.
Amazing. So hats off to you, Jutta. You rocked it.
Gosh, I'm feeling inspired from all of this. I think I need to go and achieve something.
Well, we achieved this podcast. I mean,
that
not
is true.
Bad, right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
was also its own thing.
A nice moment of reflection. But no, some phenomenal women there. Hopefully that will inspire you. And yeah, as we mentioned before, do share this podcast, spread the word so everyone can appreciate these fantastic women.
Exactly. And especially in a male-dominated industry, it's so great to hear about all the different women that have really helped innovate the entire industry of automotive sport and manufacturing. I mean, just the windshield wipers alone. Like next time you turn on your windshield wipers, you're like, oh, a woman did that. That's
exactly.
Pretty cool.
And it's just as important for the men to celebrate the women as the women do.
Exactly. 100%.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Changing Lanes.
Yes. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe to our podcast for future episodes as well.
And remember, for a bit of a deeper dive into all things BMW, head on over to bmw.com to learn more.
I'm Jonathan Tilley.
I'm Nikki Shields.
And this has been Changing Lanes.
See you next time.